Tonight we are speaking to the UDA gubernatorial candidate in Nairobi, and he is the current senator for Nairobi County, Jonson Sakaja. We're going to talk about his plan for Nairobi and many other things. Sakaja, thank you very much for joining us. Thank
you for having me. It's great to be here.
You know, obviously we wouldn't start this conversation without the controversy that has stuck to your candidature.
Yes.
And the DCI is investigating your academic credentials, yes, but the CUE has withdrawn a letter revoking the recognition of your degree. How are you dealing with that?
The law provides that for you to vie for the office of governor, you need to have a degree certificate, which I have. I presented it to the IBC. After having gone to the CUE, I presented it with my transcripts. The law provides that they then check with the counterpart institution, which they did. And the counterpart institution now checks with the issuing university, which they did, responded to them and said, yes, this was our student, everything is in order. And I think that is what possibly they're trying to poke holes at. I pursued that program, and I have the qualifications to be the governor. And not just the qualifications, but the will, the conviction, and the passion for the people of Nairobi. The competence as well as the character and capacity to move Nairobi to the next level.
As you mentioned it, the person who actually took you before the IEBC Disputes Tribunal has now appealed the very decision by the IEBC of saying there was no wrong in clearing you as a governor candidate for Nairobi. Are you confident about this process?
Well, you see, we believe in the rule of law, but it's not open to interference by the state. And I've said previously that it actually is the state that is pursuing this matter. And I think many things they've done show you their hand. For instance, if the CUE recognizes and says everything is okay, and then they revoke what they've done, and then they withdraw their revocation. So you can tell that there's a lot of confusion from there. But I'm still confident to whatever level it gets to. I stand by, everything stands on its own merit.
Let's talk about Nairobi now, because the capital of this country, and there's so many interests around Nairobi. But there's a connection between the style of leadership of a person and whether that county will succeed or not. What is your style of leadership and how will you apply it in Nairobi? And I'm saying so with the benefit of hindsight, yes, knowing what has happened in Nairobi County before. Yeah.
Number one, Nairobi is extremely important, not just to Kenya, but to the entire international community. It is the economic hub for East and Central Africa, and we want to make it Africa's real capital. We have a great vision for this city, a vision that spans more than 10, 20 years about what Nairobi must be. I've grown up in this city. I was born in Ngara. I've seen a Nairobi that was working, a city of opportunities, of hope. There was order and there was dignity, and that is what we want to bring back. And that's why there's a lot of interest in who runs the city. I have been able to, and when you ask me about my style of leadership, I've been able to study the administrations that we've had. I've looked at Governor Kidero's administration. That was a pioneer, devolved, Nairobi. I've seen his successes, because remember he was setting up institutions from scratch, setting up a lot of the structures. I've seen the successes and the failures in terms of, what went wrong. I have studied the style and the government of Mike Sonko, whom we campaigned together. And of course, during his tenure, we had a lot of disagreements because I was doing an oversight role, and I raised several issues. In fact, there's no senator who raised more issues about their county than I did about Nairobi. And I've studied also the NMS and Kananu. My style of leadership is really deliberative and collaborative. You cannot run this Nairobi as a one-man show. You need the best of everybody's capacity. You need the private sector. You need to be able to trust your officers. And as a governor, you're the vision bearer, and you paint the picture, the policy direction of where we need to go. But let your person in charge of engineering do engineering. Let your medics deal with health. So you need to trust people. There's no one with the training or the capacity to handle all the functions of the city. This city is not waiting for one Superman to come and sort it out. You need an energized and a workforce that is protected to be able to do their work, and also the citizenry of Nairobi to know the part they also play in making Nairobi work.
When you talk about Nairobi, your immediate priority, because there must be that one thing that Governor Sakaja would want to fix and gain a bit of satisfaction and say, I intended to do this thing and I have done it. What is that one thing you want to fix in Nairobi?
Then we want to create a city of order and dignity. For you to have order and dignity, number one, you need to have rules that are clear for everybody and apply to everybody. But for me to start a business, this is what I require. These are the steps. We must reorient our public service in the city to be pro-business. Instead of chasing hawkers and closing down shops and beating up people, putting market women in those lorries, Mariamus, etc., let's facilitate them to do business. And once you do that, then you give people dignity. There's no dignity in you running your shop, but you're always looking behind your neck to see if you're going to be arrested, by Kanjo. There's no dignity in jumping over, sewers and garbage heaps, trying to get home. There's no dignity in waking up your children at 4 a.m. to get to school at 8 a.m. because of traffic. There's no dignity in the fact that you're living in a place where what separates you from your children is a bedsheet, And we want to give people that ownership, order, and dignity. So there are many, many programs that then come into that. Whether we're talking about water, whether we're talking about traffic management, whether we're talking about the cleanliness. We must clean our city.
We're going to talk about that. It's important you're getting in to those things. But first, let's talk about licensing, because you've talked about it. And in your plan, I've had you talk about doing away with multiple licensing that is happening at City Hall right now. I wanted to explain a bit about your plan and merge it with, doesn't that now also deny the city county revenue?
We will not. We have to be very pragmatic. If you go to any business establishment today, right at the door, you'll see a big frame with like 6, 7, sometimes even 10 different licenses that they have to comply with. Many of them are from the county government. A few are from national government, whether it is MCSK, PRISC, and all of these statutory requirements, NEMA, etc. What that does is that it takes away the time of that business person to focus on actually making money to complying. And so those become very many avenues of corruption. Because today somebody comes to inspect whether you have the business permit. Tomorrow somebody else comes to inspect whether you have environmental license. The next day somebody comes to inspect whether you have the fire license, where you're paying 4,500 shillings to get a certificate. The certificate will not stop a fire. So what we've said is we're going to consolidate them. That we'll know this business has these requirements, are there these 5 or 6 requirements they need to fulfill. The cumulative amount might come to 20,000 or 30,000. You pay 30,000. And for me then, I make sure all the other entities are sorted out. So that you've paid one person. You've paid the county government. Once you've paid the county government, there is only one person who does the inspection. So we've not reduced the amount, because if one was 3,000, another was 5,000, another was 6,000, just pay the entire amount. And you can pay it even in installments. We'll agree on which installments you can pay, whether it is quarterly, etc. So that we facilitate you to do business. So that you're not spending time stopping, and I'll tell you, for instance, I met a few people in Buruburu who they run wines and spirits shops, and they say, look, today somebody comes and says, oh, your dustbin is a carton box. It should not be, it should be a plastic dustbin. The minute they come to your place, and they're coming with KRA and the GSU, in their WhatsApp group, they tell everybody else, and so all the other shops close. And so that is why you're seeing revenue collection has gone down in Nairobi, because of the policing aspect on revenue collection. So if there's one license, and on this road, in this part of Nairobi, the inspectorate officer is a certain individual, your license has a QR code or a barcode, and their work is to come and just confirm digitally, and you've paid it digitally from wherever you are, then no one else comes to disturb you. So we're going to increase the revenue as opposed to reducing it, because then you give that business the capacity and ability to focus on making money. Yeah.
There's a language synonymous with City Hall, which will be your office if you're elected as governor.
Not really.
Cartels.
Yes.
How do you plan to deal with that very language of cartels? And sometimes it looks like it's a perception, and then almost looks like a reality, because it appears like there are people hell-bent on controlling every aspect of service delivery in Nairobi.
I've said numerously that cartels, or the word cartel, is normally an excuse used by leaders who are either lazy or number 2, who are part of them. The first way of dealing with cartels is not to be part of them. You can't have a cabal of like 10, 15 individuals putting the lives and livelihoods of 5 million residents at ransom. So the first thing you do is number 1, have very clear rules, and dissociate from them. That yes, maybe you are doing this garbage business or you're doing health business, etc. These are the rules. If you comply with them transparently, you'll be able to operate. Number two, reduce the human interaction with cash. And that's what I'm saying we digitize. We must digitize and automate all our revenue streams. We have more than 150 revenue streams, and very few are digitized. So digitize them and have the tendering process for everything very transparent, that anyone can see and participate. Now, if you're able to play within those rules, we will work with you. But I will not sacrifice at the altar of expediency, whether it is political expediency or financial expediency, the livelihoods and the lives of the majority of my residents and my voters. So that's how we will deal with them, and sector by sector. It'll take time to change that culture. It's a culture thing, it's a value thing, when we're dealing with many aspects, whether it is water, whether it is garbage collection, whether it is our health systems, whether it is drugs, etc., in terms of our pharmaceuticals. We just need to have everything clear, and these are the rules. If you're able to participate, and people comply. Look at what happened in the education sector. People had to comply when you stand firm. Many of the people in City Hall, and I've sat with them here, I've had meetings with the county government workers, they just say, but so long as we have political cover from the governor, so long as we know that you will not let us, you not throw us under the bus, we're ready to implement rules. But what has happened in the past, somebody starts very well, very clear, this is what I want to achieve, and then because of pressure, they let go. And that's why the governor of Nairobi needs to be an extremely resilient person. You must be resilient. You must be able to have the political skills to withstand pressure, so long as you know you're doing the right thing. And as a leader, if you're doing the right thing, never fear being misunderstood. If you're doing the right thing and your conscience is clear, keep doing it. They will understand later. That is why Mishuki was able to succeed with the Matatus during his time. Of course, it didn't last. That is why even Waziri Matiang'i was able to succeed with the examination council, Waziri Magoha, because you just must be resilient and just stick to it, be consistent. People will respect that over time. Yeah.
Revenue collection, you've spoken about, automating revenue collection. You have been Senator Nairobi. Probably you can tell us some of the areas where you think there's pilferage because of the lack of automation. But most importantly, there has been an attempt, particularly by the Sonko administration, to automate revenue collection. But still at some point it failed or didn't live up to the expectations of revenue collection.
As Senator, I've had a bird's eye view on a lot of the loopholes that have been there in the county. You realize, and as I've said, very few revenue streams are automated. And so, because there's this intention to keep an active cash office, because that is where you're able to, before money is banked into the county revenue fund, there's pilferage, So the first thing we'll just go from the day one is to automate fully all the revenue streams. A lot of background work has been done. It's just execution, and there's been an unwillingness to do that by both NMS and the county governor. Number two, Governor Sonko actually tried. If you look at the highest collections of Nairobi historically were in 2016, where we hit 12.6 billion. Right now, with KRA collecting our taxes, and remember they're getting a commission from the revenue in Nairobi. They're getting a commission, what for? But with KRA doing it, together with the GSU, they hardly are hitting 8 billion, So you must give credit where it's due. Now, the process that Governor Sonko had started was actually raising the kind of revenue. Number two, you must run Nairobi, you must be very innovative in terms of your revenue. We've had certain legislation that have come through the Senate. For instance, the sectional properties law, where we're expanding, the bracket of those who are going to be paying rates. Instead of, for instance, if you build apartments here, you're still paying rates for the improved land value. Each and every unit that has been purchased will have its title, and they'll have also to pay. The valuation rule in Nairobi is from the 70s. We need to bring it up, but of course gradually, because you can't just shock people. Somebody who was paying 2,000 now has to pay 200,000. You can't do that. And so gradually we'll do it, and I foresee us being able to move our revenue up from the current 8 billion to 53 billion. It is possible in the first 2 years to do that. A lot of the work we need in Nairobi is huge infrastructural work, whether it is the water systems, whether it is a mass transit system. And so we need to be able to have an infrastructure bond. We need like 200 billion from the get-go. Otherwise, you'll just run Nairobi like a cashier, that you get money, you pay salaries, you have very little left for development, and people are collecting taxes to pay salaries. We cannot have that. We need to see this is what Nairobi needs in the next 10, 20 years. This is the phase one, this is the phase two. And so we need to be innovative. If you look at cities like Johannesburg, they're actually even listed, We have Kenyans, I've spoken to Kenyans around the world who are willing to participate with their remittances on specific projects in their capital because they feel a connection with Nairobi.
Healthcare, because it's a very important aspect in Nairobi, because there are times when city council dispensaries used to work, and this is the sources of primary healthcare in Nairobi. Nowadays is a very painful story. What is because Nairobi County has the advantage of being complemented by the national government in terms of the facilities around Nairobi, but for primary healthcare, what is your plan if you're elected governor?
The hospitals are ours, the doctors are ours, the drugs we are buying them. We can be able to subsidize the cost of healthcare for those people. So the first thing is health financing. Many people's lives get impoverished when one person gets sick. You know, you've worked as a family, you've put in some investments, you've moved on, then your mom gets sick and everything goes haywire because of not contributing for health insurance. So health financing is critical. Number two, the medical personnel, the human resource aspect of it. We don't have enough practitioners, and the ones we have been stuck at certain job groups. Many are not being paid, and I know them by name. I've sat again with them here, the health workers in Nairobi, clinical officers, the nurses, even before we get to the doctors. We must make sure that they're taken care of properly. Of course, you know, realistically, you know, we can't give them millions, but realistically, their CBAs have not been honored. They're demoralized, and they're the face, you know, they're the person who the Nairobi resident meets when you go to Pumwani. They're the one you meet when you go to whichever hospital. You find possibly in Pumwani, they don't even have a place to have lunch or tea when they're overnight, you know, when they're staying there overnight. There's no canteen. So take care of the human resource issue. Number three, the supply chain of pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical, inputs. There's no private hospital that has a shortage of Panadol or an excess supply of malaria queen because of technology. Because once you know that we're dealing with this commercially, you must be able to tell that this part of the city requires this kind of drugs. That based on the information, and I spoke about a chip, we have information that people have been coming with this ailment, the stocks are being measured based on time, based on the demand. So we'll have to deal with our shortfall with KEMSA. I'm glad that even within Kenya Kwanza, we say that we'll deal with that monopoly, so to get drugs that are cheap price and available and accountable. You cannot go to a hospital and they tell you, oh, hakuna dawa, enda huko nje. So just the stock, managing the stock of our supplies and knowing what is needed where, using technology. And finally, the health information management system. Based on that chip and that information, when you go to that Mutuini or when you go to Ngara or Pangani and you log in, the doctor or the nurse can be able to tell, this is your medical history, this is what you've been treated on for. Because many people, when your treatment is not working in one place, you go to another place, you don't say what drugs you're on. And so people are dying of very silly things because you're being given out drugs that are clashing with the other ones you got somewhere else because you're not sure what to do. So once we deal with those things, I think moving ahead, we'll have a very healthy Nairobi. Yeah.
Water scarcity is a perennial problem in Nairobi. Yeah. You see people carrying jerrycans in carts, either in their backs or whatever it is. And rationing is happening in estates in Nairobi. Sometimes even ending up with waterborne diseases because even of contamination. How do you plan to address the water shortage? Because I think the key priority amongst people living in Nairobi is water.
The demand for water in Nairobi is 850 million liters a day. So what that tells you is already there's a shortfall in the quantity. Fortunately, there's been a plan, there's been a program, what we call the Northern Collector Tunnel, that is 90% done. The Northern Collector Tunnel Phase 1, which is coming from Murang'a in Maragua, is going to provide 140 million liters to cap that shortage. It's 90% done in terms of the tunnel, but the piping then is 34% done. So that will be sorted out at the end of next year, 2023. We'll have 140 million liters, and so we'll be able to fulfill 85% of our capacity before going to Northern Collector 2, and then Karimenu, and all those other programs. So the quantity issue is being sorted out in that manner. Okay. But even as that is being sorted out, and I've sat for hours with Nairobi Water, and that's why I understand the intricacies. I'll tell you even the diameter of the pipes and where it is. Even as that is being sorted out, I'm glad NMS was able to do a few boreholes, but they were not consistent because the boreholes that were done was supposed to give free water to Nairobians. Now they're charging water, and people have taken them and privatized them, and they've not had maintenance. So you find a borehole has been done in Madare, but then for 3-4 months it's not working because of the pump, which needs 15,000 shillings to sort out. So we'll just make sure that we control and have proper maintenance of what we have. And for the dignity aspect, once we've sunk those boreholes, that water can be put into the system as we wait for the quantity to be sorted out, so that you don't have to go. So, a tap per household gives dignity, so that we reduce this issue of jerrycans. And I kept telling people, more than 70 to 80% of Nairobians have never had a shower from the top. We shower bottom up, with a bucket. I keep calling it bottom up. We need to change that. And so we have clear plans on water.
Working with the national government, the problem of congestion in the city, because you mentioned about traffic jams. And anybody who comes into Nairobi, the first thing they have to interact with is traffic jams. Working with the national government, what is your plan to end the congestion in the city? And as you do that, you can also address the problem of hawkers, particularly in downtown Nairobi.
We cannot have a situation where the only public thing about public transport is the passenger. Yeah, we need a proper mass transit public system that incorporates BRT, train, matatus, taxis, etc. That is, a comprehensive, consolidated plan. I've sat down with the French, government recently, and they said, "Oh, we are supporting this line between the airport and the town." And I said, "That is nice, but what is the holistic plan? You can't have small bits and fixes that, we now have the expressway, but what about Thika Road?" And I've always said the solution to traffic is not building more roads. No, the more roads you build, the more people buy cars. And historically, if you look across the world, that has been the issue. There's a book on a guy called Robert Moses in New York, who kept doing roads and expressways. And that's why to date they have problems, because he didn't focus on mass transit. One car takes this much space and has one person. Yet a train or a high capacity bus will have so many people in it. I have friends in huge, big capitals who are very rich, who don't own a vehicle, because there's a reliable, safe, affordable, consistent form of public transit. So we must work on the transit system. The plans were done by JICA. We spent 400 million as Nairobi. The Japanese gave us 300. The government locally gave 100. The plan is there on what we call the loop line for Nairobi, where we have a radial train, we have the huge trunk, which is now what we call, from Thika Road coming across the city, and another one on the other side of the city. That that if at 7 a.m. from Ngong, there's a train that will take me around and I'll go to South Sea, or that will take me to town by 7:20, whether there's one person or 10 people inside it. Kenyans have done these solutions across the world. I was in London, and the person who sorted out mass transit in London, who is the Dean of Civil Engineering and Environment Department, is Professor Washington Ochieng. The guy who sorted out mass transit in London and Beijing. It's him. I was in Saudi, the person who's done the Riyadh Metro, and they're part of the company managing it, and they're the same ones who did the Dubai Metro in 3 years, is George Odongo. Kenyans have these solutions. And so that for us is part of what will be our hallmark. But we're able to sort that out. We lose too much money every day sitting for hours in traffic. So I'm glad we have the expressway. I think it'll reduce the pressure, because once you deal with that chunk, ideally, and we want transparency, because why can't you pay by M-Pesa? This thing can be paid in less time than they're telling us. Though ideally, you needed to have, a rail line there. We can still find out ways of how to do an elevated train track. And it's something that we must partner with the national government. And that's why the governor of Nairobi must be able to relate very directly and consistently and daily with the national government.
I'd like to give you a last word on that camera.
Yes.
And probably talk to Nairobi citizens.
Thank you. I want to thank the citizens of Nairobi for this opportunity that I have been given to speak to you. For the last 5 years, I've served you as your senator. I've been rated the best performing senator in the country for 3 years in a row. I brought bills, I brought legislation, I've raised your issues in the Senate, but that is not enough. I want to have my hands on the steering wheel. I believe that together we can imagine a new Nairobi. Imagine a Nairobi that is working for you, wherever you are, that you have the opportunities to do business, you have the opportunities to raise your children in an environment that is safe, that is clean, in an environment that actually spurs their growth. Imagine if your child has the same opportunity as anybody else's child, and the same quality healthcare, the same quality of education, and the same quality of environment. That is the Nairobi I want us to imagine. So this is me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Sakaja Jonson, the current senator for Nairobi and now running for governor in Nairobi on a UDA ticket. We wish you all the best. Of course, in the coming 38 days. And thank you for your time. Keep watching KBC because Kenya is watching.